Several people were exploring an underground cave, but ended up taking the wrong path. The leader, in a head-down, feet-up position, got stuck in a narrow crevice, unable to move. A difficult rescue operation then began. This desperate scene took place in the United States, in a cave located in Utah County. Because the clay inside resembles putty, people call it Nutty Putty Cave, or simply the Nutty Mud Cave. Inside this cave, there is a vast network of chambers and tunnels, which attracts many adventure enthusiasts. Even locals enjoy visiting it. In the eyes of professional cavers, this cave is not considered very difficult and is suitable for beginners to practice. However, inside the cave, there are many winding and narrow passages, and one can easily get trapped. Since its discovery in 1960, more than 10 people have been trapped or injured. For safety reasons, the authorities decided to close the cave in 2006. But due to local opposition, it was reopened in May 2009, though with a reservation system in place, and the entrance would be locked at night. However, no one expected that just half a year later, an accident would occur. In late November 2009, just before Thanksgiving, 26-year-old John Edward Jones returned from Virginia with his wife Emily and their 1-year-old daughter to his hometown in Utah. They planned to spend Thanksgiving with family. At that time, his wife was over 3 months pregnant. If nothing went wrong, they would welcome their second child the next summer. After returning home, John's 23-year-old brother Josh mentioned the famous Nutty Putty Cave and suggested exploring it. The two brothers had loved cave exploration since childhood with their father, and since Nutty Putty Cave was not considered very difficult, John agreed without hesitation. But he did not know that disaster was waiting for him. About this tragic accident, there have been reports abroad, and it is also documented in disaster archives. On the morning of November 24th, the two brothers set out with 8 relatives and friends. Nutty Putty Cave is 413 meters long, and the deepest point is 44 meters underground. The entrance is located in the middle section, and shortly after entering, there is a fork in the path. To the north were several areas called the Maze, the Big Room, and the Big Crack. The caves over there were not very complicated, and explorers, as well as locals, preferred the southern side. After entering from the entrance, you would first pass a slope called the Big Slide. It was the largest open space in the entire cave. After passing through the Big Slide and going farther ahead, there was a winding and narrow cave system. One section of it, because of its unique shape, was called the Birth Canal. This was the most famous area in Nutty Putty Cave, and also a must-climb place for explorers, because every time you crawled through it, it felt like experiencing rebirth. John and the others originally only wanted to hang out at the Big Slide for a while, but later one friend suggested, why not go experience the Birth Canal ahead? The others felt they should probably not go, because although the route through the Birth Canal was not complicated, the passage itself was still very narrow. Only one person could crawl through it at a time. But for people, including John, thought it was no big deal, and they all had some cave exploration experience. So in the end, the 4 of them decided to go in and take a look. Leading the way in front was John, who had relatively more caving experience. His brother Josh was in second place, and the other 2 followed closely behind. According to the planned route, after crawling dozens of meters through the narrow section, they would enter a larger space, and reaching there meant you had made it through. After that, they would turn around in that space and return the way they came. Countless people had already crawled this route, and there had never been any danger, so they were not worried. But at one fork in the passage, John crawled in the wrong direction. He did not go left, but crawled to the right instead. And the area on the right was not marked on the map. The passage there was narrower and also a dead end. Even if they could crawl to the end, there was almost no room to turn around. To get out, they could only crawl backward. But John thought he was still inside the birth canal. He felt that as long as he got through this section, an open space would appear. So he kept desperately squeezing forward. After that, he came upon a place called the Scout Trap, where a rock jutted downward. To get through it, he had to crawl with his body bent. Because this structure did not appear on the birth canal map, John began to realize that he might have gone the wrong way. So then, he quickly told the 3 people behind him not to keep moving forward. If they had just backed out then, the accident would not have happened. But John was thinking that there might also be an open space similar to the birth canal ahead, and it would be better to turn around there. After all, crawling backward was just as difficult, so he decided to go ahead alone and take a look. Afterward, he noticed that the lower area ahead seemed to have an open space. John quickly crawled toward it, but things did not go the way he wanted. The space there still did not allow him to turn around. John refused to give up and decided to keep exploring forward. Then he discovered another downward crack about 25 by 45 centimeters in size, roughly the size of an ordinary laptop. John hesitated for a moment, but still decided to go down and take a look. What if there was a big open space after getting through it? To make his chest as small as possible to squeeze into the hole, John forcefully exhaled the air from his lungs. He did manage to get inside, but just as he was about to inhale, disaster struck. Because his chest expanded again, he became stuck directly in the crack. John immediately became panicked. He struggled desperately, trying to back out. But each struggle only made him sink in deeper. One of John's arms was even pinned against his body, and his other arm was stretched out in front, unable to exert any force. John was completely unable to move. Even worse, because of the angle of the crack, which was about 73 degrees, John was basically stuck in an upside-down position with his head down and feet up. And the structure of the human body is not designed for us to stay upside down for long periods. Otherwise, the heart's ability to pump blood would also be severely affected. The pressure on the internal organs would also make it even harder for the lungs to expand and breathe. Realizing how serious the situation was, John began loudly calling for his brother Josh. Josh quickly crawled over to check on him, and could barely see only his brother's lower legs sticking out. He tried many times to pull his brother out, but the cave was too low, and he simply could not get enough leverage, and every time he pulled, John sank in even deeper. During the pulling, John was scratched by the rocks in many places. So John told his brother to stop and go find rescue help. But because there was no signal inside the cave, Josh had to crawl backward all the way back to the surface before he could call 911 for help. After waiting for 2 hours, a rescuer named Susie was the first to arrive. He was a professional caver and was also very familiar with Nutty Putty Cave. Small in stature, he quickly crawled to John's side. But after exhausting himself, he still could not pull John out even a little. Susie was overwhelmed. He realized that it was impossible for him alone to pull John out. But the space there was far too narrow to allow two people to come and pull at the same time. Afterward, John's family and other rescue personnel arrived one after another. By then, since John had been trapped, more than 3 hours had already passed, and the golden rescue window for a person in an inverted position is generally considered to be only about 10 hours, after which the trapped person is highly likely to be in mortal danger. The rescue team discussed various rescue methods outside, such as sawing off his legs, but people quickly rejected that idea because it was John's chest that was stuck. Without his legs, he would actually be even harder to rescue, and using anesthesia in an upside-down position was also very dangerous. Afterward, they prepared to drill away the rock around John. But because the passage was too narrow, large equipment simply could not get in. They could only use small hand drills to chip away little by little. At that speed, it would take days. And John definitely would not be able to hold on that long. Suddenly, they remembered a rescue from 5 years earlier. Also inside Nutty Putty Cave, a 16-year-old boy had also been stuck in the cave head down and feet up. At the time, rescuers used a pulley system and worked the entire night before finally getting him out. So perhaps this time they could use a similar method. The specific plan was to drill holes inside the cave and install multiple pulleys, then thread a rope through them. The rescuers outside would pull on one end of the rope, while the other end would be tied to John's legs. That way, the upward force would be greater, and the rope could also avoid rubbing directly against the rock. After finalizing the plan, the pulleys were immediately brought into the cave, and installation began. But at this point, John's physical and mental condition began to deteriorate continuously. In order to help him hold on, the rescuers ran a telephone line into the cave so he could talk with his family. By the 19th hour of John being trapped, the pulley system was finally installed. After tying the rope to John's legs, they began the first attempt. As they pulled, John endured tremendous pain because he was stuck far too tightly. So every pull caused the rocks to cut wounds into his body. His screams could be heard from time to time inside the cave, but there was no other choice. They could only ask him to endure it for a while. John really was pulled out a little, but because the height inside the cave was too low, each time his feet would hit against the ceiling, and then it could no longer be pulled. The rescuers had no choice but to stop and reposition the pulley, while also using hand tools to widen the nearby space. The entire rescue process was extremely complicated. During the third pull, the situation began to improve. John's head was almost out of the hole. He could even make eye contact and talk with the rescuers. Everything was moving in a better direction. But in order to pull John out completely, they had to find a way to get John's body into a horizontal position. So, the rescuers had no choice but to keep John suspended by the rope, while continuing to widen the surrounding space. To prevent John from mentally breaking down, they turned on the walkie-talkie again and placed it beside John. John's wife Emily encouraged him, saying, "Honey, just hold on a little longer. They'll be able to get you out soon." Their little daughter, just over 1 year old, was also babbling beside them, talking to her daddy. As they talked, John began to cry. He said he did not want to die. He wanted to know what his daughter would look like when she learned to walk, and wanted to stay with her and watch her grow up slowly. He also wanted to know what their second child would look like after being born, and what name they should give the baby, and so on. Just like that, time came to around 10 p.m. and the rescuers decided to begin the fourth attempt. But this time, an accident happened. Just as several people were pulling the rope, a rock anchoring the pulley suddenly cracked, and John fell back into the hole again. And because of gravity, this time he sank even deeper than before. He may even have hit his head, because the rescuer in front had suffered facial injuries. So they had to switch to someone else to stay with John. The one who took over was John's father, Dave Jones, a member of the local rescue team. After Dave reached his son's side, he found that John was still breathing, but it had become shallow and weak. This father anxiously called out his son's name, and John finally responded. He said, "Dad, I'm not getting out, right? I'm probably going to die here." Dave quickly comforted him, saying, "Don't think like that. We will get you out." In order to wrap the rope around John's waist and pull again, Dave desperately squeezed himself into the narrow crack as well. And he got stuck too. Fortunately, he was not stuck very deep, and his build was not as strong as his son's. So after struggling, he managed to free himself. In the time that followed, the rescuers behind them rechecked and refastened the pulley, while the father kept talking with his son. At first, John could still answer him, but gradually only his breathing remained. When the new rigging was finally installed, John's father was already utterly exhausted. To improve the chances of success in the next rescue attempt, a rescuer replaced Dave. But a little more than 10 minutes later, a heartbreaking message was sent back to the surface. John seemed to have no signs of life anymore, because his skin was ice cold, and the muscles in his legs had started to stiffen. Then a doctor also crawled over to check and confirmed that John had indeed died. The time was 11:56 p.m. on November 25, 2009. Exactly 27 hours after John had become trapped, which was twice the medical limit generally considered survivable. But John still did not live to see the moment he was rescued. John's family immediately burst into tears, and the 137 rescuers were overcome with a deep sense of defeat. Over the past 20+ hours, they had hardly rested at all, but they still failed in the end. In the remaining time, the rescue operation did not stop. They tried all kinds of methods to bring John's body out, but in the end, they all failed. Recovering the dead was even harder than rescuing the living, because the place where John was trapped was too deep and too narrow. If they pulled by force, his body would very likely be torn apart, and the rescuers themselves would also be in danger. So after discussion, John's family decided to leave John in the cave forever. A week later, the local authorities decided to permanently close the cave. They sealed the entrance with concrete, and this cave expedition also became John's final resting place. And his family set up a memorial plaque at the cave entrance with John's name and photo on it. In June of the following year, John's wife, Emily, gave birth to her and John's second child, a boy. Emily named him John in memory of her husband. 3 years after John's death, Emily gradually came out of her grief. She also started dating a new boyfriend, Delon Sanchez, in August 2012. After getting John's parents' consent, the two decided to get married. John's father even walked Emily down the aisle and gave the couple his blessing. Now, Emily and her new husband also have a child. Fortunately, Dolan treats John's children as his own, and the two children also like him very much. The family of 5 lives very happily. They also attend John's family gatherings every year. Emily said that she hopes both children will remember their father and remember their family for John in heaven. Although he can no longer be with his children, this may still be a relatively good ending. Alright, that's the end of this video. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next video.